All right. Hi, everybody. I hope that our very brief 2-minute break was enough to kind of at least turn the page, because I know my notebook is already full of and my head spinning from all these really great presentations and talks today. And I think that this presentation and these talks and this inspiring work is really only going to continue with our next panel. We have 3 really fantastic entrepreneur and industry experts that we are going to be joined by today. And so I'd like to take a moment to introduce our 3 panelists that we have joining us. And I am going to take moderator's privilege because I have 3 questions for them before we turn it over to the audience. And I'm really hoping we'll be able to have a conversation today. So as they are speaking for our first 3 questions, please feel free to throw questions in the chat. I will keep an eye on those, and I will pose questions to our 3 speakers as we go. So first up, we have Jose Huitron. He is the Director of Student Innovation Programs at the CalPoly Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, where he identifies and supports student-led entrepreneurial ventures. He's a longtime pillar of entrepreneurial capacity building on the Central Coast, having launched several companies spanning from content creation, digital marketing, and activating access to capital for underrepresented founders. We are also joined by Wilson Lester, who is a renowned expert in community finance and economic development, whose efforts continue to forge access to capital and resources for fellow Black entrepreneurs. He has founded and built many organizations, including the Piedmont Business Capital Firm, a North Carolina-based CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, and revolving small business loan fund that has delivered millions in impact of capital to Black businesses across North Carolina. And most recently, he has co-founded Partners in Equity in North Carolina, an investment fund focused on supporting owner-occupied commercial real estate for Black and women-owned businesses. And last, but certainly not least, is Judy Mcneill. She is the Director of the Diversity Business Resource Center at the Riverside Center for Innovation, serving the Pittsburgh area. And in this role, she oversees programs, trainings, and events to assist small businesses, focusing on women, minority, veteran, and disadvantaged companies and entrepreneurs in their efforts to start up, grow, maintain, and sustain. She brings 22 plus years of experience in working in nonprofits for the betterment of communities. So we are thrilled to have these 3 experts on our call today. And my first question for each of you is just a chance to get to know each of you a little bit better. And could you provide a brief overview of your work and how it relates to equity and entrepreneurship? Jose, would you mind kicking us off?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the organizers. Thank you for the invitation, my esteemed panelists, colleagues. It's awesome to be here together with such individuals making tremendous impact. So Jose Huitron, I'm honored to be here. I have a passion for ideas and entrepreneurship. I believe that nobody has a monopoly on good ideas, and I believe that there's so much potential when we come together. So it's part of my work is with the CalPoly Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship in San Luis Obispo on the Central Coast of California, and in the heartland of just really grassroots and impactful activities around bringing people and ideas together. And so part of my work has kind of centered and evolved around ideas, technology, impact, and access to capital. And I've kind of been ingrained into, when I talk about access to capital, it's capital in all its forms: social capital, opportunity, financial capital, and just a passion for helping to build people and helping them build their ventures and ideas. And I get to do that in an ecosystem here at the CalPoly Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We run multiple innovation programs, including pitch competitions, Accelerator, our big program that we spend our summer on 12, 13 weeks, just really trying to accelerate and catalyze real startup possibilities with education and building the entrepreneurial mindset at a core. I'm not going to take too much stage time. I know I have some amazing peers here, but my background also includes helping empower underrepresented founders. Previously served as the Latino Startup Alliance president, a Silicon Valley-based organization to identify and source and support Black, brown founders and startups. And so I also launched the first crowdfunding platform targeting underrepresented founders to provide access to capital, specifically with that through what we called at the time Crowdismo. So super fired up, super awesome to be here. And so, yeah, when it comes to opportunity and equity, I think I love what Mashia Poor said, VP for WVU, Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm a mountaineer. I have history with WVU. And I love what she said. She says, we have to ensure what we promise is what we produce. We have to ensure what we promise is what we produce. And we're working on it. We're trying to make things happen. And I'm trying to personally be responsible to identify, source, and support all founders from all walks. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jose. We are so lucky to have you today. Wilson, would you mind sharing a little bit about your work?
Great. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. This is a fantastic event. I popped in one time earlier, and I'm really excited to be here with these panelists that are with me. You all are doing great things, and I'm excited about that. So my work has really been focused for a long time on providing equity and access to capital. And I started my journey down that path working on the debt side of that relationship, providing access to low barrier debt for Black and brown entrepreneurs, which led me to the opportunity to really develop a CDFI in the central part of the state of North Carolina called Piedmont Business Capital. And during that time, we made millions of dollars in loans, but those loans were $5,000, $15,000, $20,000 at a time, really threading the needle of those opportunities that escaped many business owners in our community just because it's expensive to underwrite a business loan, and that's not really attractive to mainstream banking. And if you're a startup and you're not a startup in the venture world, you're a Main Street business where most Black and brown and businesses live as service-based businesses. It's hard to get access to that kind of low dollar, low barrier capital. So we were able to successfully do that and really develop a revolving loan fund through it. And while I believe that access to debt is important and will continue to be important and needs to continue to proliferate throughout our communities in a more equitable way, I saw even a deeper disparity in access to patient capital or equity for Black and brown businesses, which allowed me the opportunity to work with two other folks that were in my sphere that were concerned about the same things. And we launched a $15 million fund in the state of North Carolina focused on assisting Black and brown businesses with acquiring real estate, that down payment assistance, but with a lot more comfort of a friends and family type of ground. Historically, our communities haven't had friends and families that we could go to ask for that capital. We secretly dubbed ourselves the Rich Uncle Fund when we first started because there's not a lot of folks that have the traditional means of investing in their family members. Traditionally, we see that through home equity lines, right? And I was fortunate that Steve and the team invited me earlier in the year to talk about redlining on a local panel in Greensboro, North Carolina, which has been a tremendous impact and threatened the viability of wealth in Black communities historically. And while it may look different in many cases, there's still some challenges. But, you know, that's where my work really intersects entrepreneurship, is by finding and sourcing equitable pathways for businesses owned by people of color to experience ownership, to experience growth, and ultimately experience wealth accumulation through small business, which we all know is the fastest pace or fastest pathway for one individual to create first-time wealth in a generation in their family.
Thank you so much, Wilson. I'm so glad we have you on this panel to speak to that capital side, because I think sometimes, particularly with libraries, we work in knowledge and support. And so having somebody who can speak to capital and capital access, particularly given the racial wealth divide and the historical barriers for entrepreneurs of color, this is such a key piece of what the barriers are. And so I'm really excited that we have you here to speak about that and have you have that specific voice in the room. And so lastly, Judy, I will turn it over to you to hear a little bit more about your work.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invite. I was actually picked on by Hillman Library at the University of Pittsburgh, LaMonica, who I think she's on here. So I appreciate her thinking of me and asking me to be involved. And from what I've heard from my other panelists, we're kind of all definitely have the wagon circled as far as when it comes to assisting, Black and brown entrepreneurs, minority, businesses all around. So Riverside Center for Innovation, was established in 1983. It's a 501c3, and it evolved to where the issues were with women, disadvantaged businesses, diverse businesses getting this assistance they needed to start, grow, maintain, sustain. And so therefore the Diversity Business Resource Center, which I'm the director of, grew out of that. And at Riverside, what we do is we provide what we call, and it's kind of like our trademark name, BizFit entrepreneurial trainings. And there's different levels where we bring in startup and new businesses at level 3, what we call BizFit 3. Then those who next go to BizFit level 2, they're more intermediate because now they are, actually in business. They got a plan, they got financials. We've helped them with marketing. So we do these trainings to just hold their hand and guide them along so that when they start their business, that it's appropriately and officially and legally started, to make sure that we educate them on things like certifications, being that's important with getting into contract opportunities, here in the Pittsburgh area. We do things like bonding, because we do have a lot of construction going on in the area of Pittsburgh, Southwest PA. And so that is a big niche, of our entrepreneurs here. Also, we do a lot of referrals, and we just want things, we're trying to make a fair, an impartial playing field for, the businesses. We also work with veteran businesses and with the state of Pennsylvania, they call diverse. So we're kind of like here, we get calls from everyone, like all over, we work with banks, we work with government agencies, with the universities, which Pittsburgh, of course, is full of, the Small Business Development Center. So we're all referring each other, because they have people who say, oh, I want to start a business, or, oh, I have a business and I need help with this. And they are referred to us. And then from there, we can assist them through our training programs or refer them out to, our other partners. So collaborative partnerships, is a big thing. So like I said, when someone comes, we're going to give them the whole gamut from beginning to end, hold their hand. And most of our entrepreneurs, when we started this program, who started with us on level 3, who has since graduated out of, the first level. And we have a mentoring program too, that even after they're out of that we keep in touch, started out at low dollar amounts and eventually they're like over the $1 million mark with the businesses that we work with. And so some of the things that we do, like, related to equity and entrepreneurship, like intentional investment. So we have some banks where we created special funds for the businesses who are enrolled in our program that meet certain qualifications where they will overlook credit. They will give businesses a chance because, we know access to capital, which Wilson mentioned, is a big thing. Also strategic partnerships. We have stakeholders with other nonprofits. I sit on several different committees to all work with, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this helps. With Pittsburgh, it's a city, but it's a small city and everyone knows everyone, which can be good and bad. But yet, in the business atmosphere, it really helps those that we're working with. And so some of the things we also want to see, like to empower, the business owners. So not only leading to like them building wealth that was mentioned, but health equity too. We want to see them become homeowners. We want to see them have safe neighborhoods, better healthcare. So it all kind of, relates back to, the equity and entrepreneurship, and just start with that basic training, getting them to the point where they are making money, getting contracts, hiring employees, and, making a difference in their communities.
No, Judy, I think you did a great job of highlighting that pathway, those long-term, from when someone walks in right at the beginning to where that can go. And I feel like you actually did a great job of summarizing what an entrepreneurship ecosystem is by everybody knows everybody, and that's a good thing, but maybe not a good thing. So, so my next question for each of you is actually probably the biggest possible question I could ask, which is, what barriers do you see facing entrepreneurs of color specifically in your work? And what are some steps to address those? And so I just really, for the audience, I wanted us to start with like, what are some of these like kind of systemic and embedded barriers that like, just like, let's start with what that system looks like walking in as an entrepreneur of color before we start talking about what's the role of libraries or what are the resources, but just to say, why do we need that to begin with? And so Wilson, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot first with this question, I know it's a big one. So, but just in terms of your work and your perspective with capital access, around how you see some of those barriers playing out and kind of the steps you're taking.
Yeah, so I think that we have to get to the root of what the issues are whenever we talk about this. And I think the bottom line is that we live in the United States of America that was established through pillaging activities of global communities. And what that has resulted in is an institution that has embedded policy that creates natural barriers for certain demographics, races, and classes of people. And that is probably the biggest challenge that structurally we have to deal with as a national community. The issue is that when we act as if that's not the case and think that we can just resolve it without having this very realistic conversation and awareness of what our challenges are. So there's not a person that can become employed and decide on their own that they want to create challenges for people of color or people that are impoverished. They're working on a grid that has already done that. And then they may have their own issues. But I think that's the biggest barrier in the way of capital, because so much access to capital is based on regulation, and regulation is based on the laws that are set in place, and the ability to make certain loans based upon where you source the capital from automatically prevents people from being able to have that opportunity. So this is not a knock to my friends working at CDFI. I love CDFI. I think it is extremely important. And, I know CEOs and loan officers and people doing God's work every day all over this country. But one of the reasons that I wanted to get away from it is because the larger our organization grew, the different access to different kinds of capital we could get to deploy in the community grew. But with that growth came more strings. And with those strings meant that I wasn't at some point really going to be able to have Mr. and Mrs. Jones or Mr. and Mrs. Garcia walk into my office and say, this is what I need to do. I really only need $8,500. And me make it make sense with the tools that I had to do that as we scale. And I wanted to run toward a way of being able to access capital that was directed by people, private individuals that owned it. So that Jose could say to me, hey, Wilson, I'm concerned about about my community here, and I want, $10 million to focus on growing and scaling service-based businesses in my community. And then we have the authority to take that $10 million and then do it, because that's how Jose has directed it. And so with that, that's how I'm addressing the barriers, right? I'm addressing the barriers because what I've also discovered in this journey is that there is far more private capital in America that is doing nothing than there is public capital that is associated with strings in policy. So my journey, my goal is to work with like-minded people and figure out how we put that private capital into the market and start to change the paradigm of individuals that are growing and scaling businesses that are not just creating independent wealth for themselves, but are proliferating consistent and well-paying job opportunities for folks where they are, and that are designed for folks where they are, not businesses coming to market, but businesses that were already in the market that oftentimes could create the same type of value and impact that our traditional citywide stakeholders are trying to create through active marketing to large corporations that will hopefully spawn opportunities in our cities. I'm sorry if I spoke too long.
No, that was perfect. I actually think that really framed like exactly what we were kind of like, I think for both, for the other panelists and for me in terms of that question is like basing it and understanding that system and how you can then use that to understand. But I think you also brought so many great points around the reminder of scaling and what you can and can't do when you're working at different sizes. And also I think too that the private capital piece, because with public libraries, at least in my background in public libraries and academic institutions, we're working with public dollars. And so we don't always think about some of the other entities when it comes to capital access and the opportunities and where that wealth sits and what that could look like. So I'm so appreciate you sharing that, Wilson. Judy, I would love to turn it over to you if you wouldn't mind touching on how you've seen some of this play out in your work.
Yeah, so here in Southwest Pennsylvania, some of the barriers, and we probably have like many that we all share, but business support and training, so that the people of color dealing with finding staff, offices, having the business acumen, that's always been a barrier. So, lacking proper infrastructure, or what we call soft tissue services, from staffing and legal to marketing. So Riverside, we provide a lot of those, that assistance, in our training. And just as far as we have been very fortunate to develop relationships with corporations, and law firms that, we have a pro bono legal service. We also have what we call like a menu of services where our businesses can get help with bidding and estimating or accounting, taxes and things of that nature. So what it is people finding out, that we're here, and that we exist and that we can help, I'd say another barrier, is connectivity, where a business starting out, for them to obtain customers and then retain these customers. Same thing, relationships with what we call anchor institutions, corporations, things like that, networking. So these are all activities and events, that we do, on a regular basis. We want to get, our businesses in the room, with these anchor institutions and corporations and so forth. And I think Wilson mentioned something too, where here too, a lot of lifestyle, we call them lifestyle businesses, you know, in the communities. And so, you know, they may not grow at the same rate as certain other businesses, but finding out, you know, if they're getting the training and the dollars they need, you know, it impacts their community so that they are hiring people that look like them, you know, and these people, once again, can also grow. So we look at that a lot. Access to capital, which like, that's always, you know, I probably could have put that first, but since Wilson was talking, that's always a big thing. And as I mentioned earlier, like access to capital for growth and just daily operations. I mean, here in the Pittsburgh area with construction being so big, union signatories, you know, make a lot of money get work, but they have to have the capital to be able to carry payroll, you know, to cover benefits and things like that. So some of the programs, you know, that we set up with some of the local banks with these special loan programs will assist because we have the line of credits and we have loans that can help them, you know, and they range from $50,000 to $150,000. And also, Wilson, I used to oversee a CDFI in my other life before coming to Riverside for the last 10 years. But I'm familiar with that. And so that was another way, you know, and we have several of those in the Pittsburgh area that we work with, you know, to help our businesses as well. We also at Riverside, we have Kiva. And I don't know if people are familiar, it's crowdfunding. So we have a Pittsburgh Kiva manager. And like you said, you know, ranging from a small loan of 500 up to 10,000. And we even have our own debt equity that we put in. So if someone comes in and they don't raise enough, we can put the match in so that they meet their goals. So these are all just little things, you know, that build along to help the business, you know, in their efforts. But also something just with the, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion policies, it's like we're noticing there's a lot of these positions being created now, some that existed, but then through some of these people really have the decision-making powers, and we're finding that's not so in some cases. And that can be, you know, a problem when we're looking at supplier chains, you know, and as far as like getting our small businesses to be able to, you know, get contracts or have opportunities. One of the things we do too, you know, with information, we have like a weekly, you know, we call weekly blast where, you know, we put everything in there, like all the events, trainings, networkings, you know, opportunities so that, you know, we are letting people know, you know, what's out there, or we actually have a direct pipeline where, you know, people call us for assistance and we can refer, you know, businesses. What's happening, of course, our business database is growing. So another way, like with dealing with barriers, if we work with like another group, they're called the E3 Alliance here in Pittsburgh. So it's made up of other, you know, organizations like ours that maybe they focus on food businesses, or this one focuses on retail businesses, you know, or this one helps with credit, you know. And so these are all the things, you know, like I said, this network, this relationship, you know, that helps us, you know, address a lot of the barriers. So it's constantly ongoing, you know, never ending. But that's what we're here for, you know, that's what I'm here for. And I stay busy all the time, you know, with the efforts of, you know, helping our businesses succeed. That's the main thing. We want them to be around for a while.
Judy, I feel like you're really speaking to me because I've been doing so much digging the last few years around ecosystem building and that connectivity piece and the anchor institutions and having like, it's almost like you need to have the infrastructure for someone when they walk in so they know you're there, but they know that other person down the street is there and they have the representation. It's like just how those pieces all come together. And I feel like I would just kept writing down things you were saying because I was like the ecosystem piece is so important. And I think that's such a key reminder around like, how do we address barriers? We need to have the right system in place for someone to walk in. They can't figure that system out themselves.
And until the pandemic, you know, we had all these things in our offices, you know, where we brought in the credit counselors, we brought in, you know, like what people needed, but we pivoted to virtual, you know, this virtual world. So we're still, you know, coming along, still making headway.
Just trying to find whole new ways to build that new ecosystem infrastructure in in-person and virtual environment. Not a tall order at all. So.
But we created what we called our digital citizens now, because that was a big thing, technology. And, maybe I didn't mention that, as a barrier, but that's something that we had to definitely, approach going forward with the pandemic, and realizing people not having the equipment, the systems, the knowledge or training. So, and I'll set up. So Jose.
No. This is, I'm like, oh, Jose, I want to hear from you too. And I'm like, Judy, I still have so many things. But that digital equity piece, I don't want to lose, because I think libraries specifically, public libraries, which is what I work with at the Urban Libraries Council, but academic libraries with students, they see those access barriers in terms of broadband access, in terms of device access, in terms of digital literacy.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all very real. So I don't want to lose that, but I think that's spot on as well. And that being left out of this conversation I don't want that to happen. But Jose, I would love to hear a little bit about what you see from your lens.
Yeah, well, thank you. Wow, there's a lot of great knowledge being shared. And Judy, wow, education is key. I love what you said, and connectivity. And that point of connectivity, so I'm so tempted to cross over, and I will bring kind of the industry and community view. I'm bringing kind of like the entrepreneurial center on campus view of running the hatchery and our innovation programs. And, but yes, connectivity education is key. And, when I think about connectivity, I think about access points and on-ramps and, needing to identify our spheres of influence and then cultivate relationships that help us inspire consequential. I love how one person termed it, consequential patterns for impact. And I like what Wilson said in the beginning is, let's get real. Let's talk about, what's happening in the nation and in the world and the climate that we're in as, a global unprecedented time. In terms of getting real, I work at a primary white institution, and I find it a tremendous honor to be a role model and to try and model the way for the different ecosystems that we have. When you talk about barriers, there's real barriers. And I'm super stoked to be a part of a community that's taking a real effort to change the tide and to make things happen. And so for us specifically on a campus environment, we have to be present to be present. We have to be active. We have to take the effort to seek out support and rally resources around our community, and to be individually, targeted towards underrepresented founders and groups and students who may feel isolated and excluded from our on-ramps that we consistently pitch, whether it's our elevator pitch competition, our innovation quest, our summer accelerator, or whatever programs we have to be intentional in our programs and outreach. And so that's what I do, day in, try to. A lot of work is still in order for us to change the tide and to really increase the diversity, equity, and inclusion within our community. But it is a top of mind item. And I love what Judy said about the soft tissue approach. That's it has to be soft. And you have to acknowledge the benefits and impacts of a cohesive, collaborative, inclusive, tolerant community. And and then on the side, from a working with students and working with peers and partners and resources within this academic ecosystem, ideas and entrepreneurship can come from anywhere, and we recognize that. And the same within our shared communities. Nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. Genius is equally distributed across these different colleges and programs and departments. But what's not is our access and opportunities and role models and tangible impact, like we're seeing with what Wilson and Judy and many folks in Adina are working on to foster impact. And so for me, it's championing the programs, creating those on-ramps, trying to find and source those pathways into equity, from an equity mindset. And we got a lot of work to do. Last year, our programs, I'm thankful that we're facilitating a lot of impact with the number of applications and number of entrepreneurs that are coming into our community that ultimately, our academic campus, that ultimately impact the greater community and the region as a whole. We're centered in the center of the best, what we would consider on the West Coast between LA and San Francisco, two immense entrepreneurial hubs to the north and south. And in the center is the Central Coast, and San Luis Obispo and UCSB and CalPoly, we're really a beacon. We're a beacon to the rest of the region. So what happens in the classroom, whether I'm teaching Intro to Entrepreneurship or working with a hatchery student to help them go from idea to execution, what happens in the classroom will affect our region tremendously. And so when I step out my view from the classroom and our innovation programs into what's happening in my communities, there's a lack of resources. There's lack of role models and tangible action. And, there's a lot of lip service, but we got to come together and make stuff happen. So there's a lot of challenges, a lot of real barriers. And so I love this question around the barriers. And, so how do we address these barriers? I think it's the ability to identify and relate to our role models. We can do a lot more to champion and celebrate progress. I love that this is focused on connectivity and education and information. Information is a powerful tool. So the more we can celebrate success stories and milestones, it's important that we're time stamping, that no one can take away from us what's happening by founders and entrepreneurs and us as impact players across our different communities. So, I'm actively seeking out ways to collaborate with different clubs and organizations on campus to create things like the Opportunity Fund to address opportunity and access gaps, specifically in and out of the community. Information is power. And I have personal experience with Mark, our librarian here at the Orfalea College of Business. Mark was a tremendous resource for me prior to my time at CalPoly. And when I was launching a crowdfunding platform, I was trying to understand what really happens when an underrepresented founder comes to a bank to try to request a loan. That's not going to happen. Mark was tremendously impactful, giving me the information I need to keep moving forward. And so I think that leads us to our next question is, how do you see the role of libraries and opportunities for libraries in addressing equity and entrepreneurship? And there's a little bit there. It's just, empowering with information. We need information on the markets, the customers, the trends, and there's so much happening in the chat that I can't keep up with, but creating a digital hub for us digital citizens to be able to access this at our fingertips in an Airtable or in a Trello or something, I think would be a way for us to go from Zoom University to actually being able to do something with what we're all spending our time with on today. So identification, there are barriers, we got work to do, and I'm excited to be kind of affect that here at the CIE and then in the region as a whole.
Jose, I'm so glad you were sharing your experience, because I know a majority of our audience is actually academic librarians today. And so I actually, and shout out to Mark, who was also on the call from CalPoly and on our planning committee. Because I think that's thinking about, I think when you're in an academic institution, you have an ecosystem at the institution with its own set of barriers. And then you have the community with its another set of it's almost like a mini ecosystem in a larger ecosystem and like a donut. So I think you really spoke to that, and you perfectly segued us into our next question in terms of the role of libraries, both academic and public, and thinking about where you see the opportunities from your perspective for libraries to be more thoughtfully and more impactfully engaging in this work around equity and entrepreneurship and creating access to entrepreneurship, and just starting us off with access to information. But Judy, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot first, and I know we only have a few minutes left, but I just think that this is going to be a great way for us to tie it up.
So, the role of libraries, like I said, how I was, requested, to participate in this. And I was at a networking event when I met Monica. Actually, she was working for the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, and, since then with Hillman at Pitt. But anyway, when I met her and found out what she did and what the libraries offered, I was like, oh my goodness, we have to connect. Matter of fact, we actually put them into our training program where there is a session just on libraries, industry analysis, all the things that libraries offer, And so once again, I think something, that we're not saying is free. We tell people the library is free. This is you as a business owner, take advantage of this. So that's why we implemented this into our training. And we got people in class oh my God, you mean I could look at get the Business Times or I can go in this database and find out like what other businesses I'm competing with in my area. I mean, like the wide range of information that is out there, the databases. And like you said, information, education, knowledge is so important. Same thing, technology, you know, the training, you know, that you have. Like I said, our partnerships, you know, and collaborations that we have with the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Library have been phenomenal. And the people who like go to that session, and not only did we start offering it in our first, you know, for startup new businesses, but we offer it in each of our next tiers as well, because each time you learn something new, you know, or you know, catch on to something new that can assist, you know, if you're looking at demographics, you're looking at charts. I mean, you guys as librarians, you know, offer so much to the business owner, you know, to help them, you know, do their research, you know, do their business plan, you know, do their marketing. So I truly appreciate that. Same thing, the libraries guide, you know, offer guidance and referrals to organizations and agencies like ours, you know, and then in turn, that's how, you know, they get referred to other institutions or, you know, or organizations who can help. So, you know, I just get real excited, you know, and you guys have training programs as well. And like I said, it's like every time, you know, and we've been offering this, we do our trainings for new startups like twice a year. And I'm usually at this session. And then in our once a year for our tier 2 and 1s, it's like still every time I go, I learn something new. And I always tell everyone, you learn something new every day. If you don't, something's wrong. And as a business owner, you know, you're going to learn something new. So I appreciate you librarians and our libraries here in the Pittsburgh, Southwest Pennsylvania area.
No, thank you so much, Judy. And that free, and as Mimi pointed out, it's being paid for by public dollars. And there's some, one of my most recent projects has been, I'm trying to create a calculator for libraries to be like, look, we had this many people use these services and it's millions of dollars going into the local business community to justify and invest more in that. But I think that point around, how, you know, getting more people aware of what is at the library, it's that same going back to what you were, we're here to help. And so, but I think that using that free piece also of those resources that the library has can get a seat at that ecosystem table that people might not think, oh, the library does belong in the business community. So it's changing that perception a little bit. And Wilson, I'm going to let us bleed over a few minutes into our break if that works for all of you. There's a lot of excitement, but Wilson, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your thoughts in terms of the role of libraries.
I appreciate the question. I love libraries. I've always been an entrepreneur my entire life. I used to think I wanted to make films, and I remember going to the bookstore and not the bookstore, but the library, and reading about all these different positions that it takes to make a film. And it's still a tremendous and growing and expansive resource. And actually, I was in the chat having a conversation with someone, and I think this is a great point around private equity. A resource that I would love to see libraries have, particularly for the business librarian to have access to do some research on behalf of folks that visit the library, is a system called PitchBook. It is extremely expensive for an individual or even a company to have a subscription. But if the public library had a subscription and the business librarian could go and help do that research, particularly for communities of color and folks that just would never be able to have access to this information any other way, I think it would be an extraordinary asset for public libraries across our country to consider having PitchBook. It is so expensive. It is so expensive. It costs an employee in many cases. But if you think about how that information coming down to the ground level, one thing I always hear, and Morgan, who's on the call, will attest to this, you know, our public library is on the bus line, right? Which is great. I'm glad that it's on the bus line. We need as much information as possible on the bus line too. And if you can get this kind of context down to that level, I think the economic impact of it in the long term would be extraordinary, particularly for all types of businesses. Judy mentioned lifestyle businesses. I just want to note this real quick. This past week, famous designer named Virgil Abloh passed away from cancer, okay? He was the creative director for Louis Vuitton, worked with famous people like Kanye West and all this other kind of stuff, really blew up. He was somebody in the Chicago community that was designing t-shirts, screen printing. But he at some point gained access to the right information, the right people, and was able to go much further. If we know what the assets are that are impactful, then we have to invest in them. And we need a critical mass of people recommending to those that control that public spend to invest in that system for our business librarians.
Wilson, they're so spot on. And I think the pitch book example is a really good one. There is just something I want to call out in the chat, which the best model I've seen, which is actually more private dollars, Mark Pond from Spokane Public, who is on the call today. I've learned from him. He's taken perhaps the most entrepreneurial approach to the pitch book approach by crowdsourcing. So local businesses who want access to pitch book will throw money and donate it at the library. And then the library can cover the subscription for everybody. And the library as kind of an entity, that makes sense. But I think to your point, though, in terms of thinking about what assets are we investing in as library staff, as making those decisions, we need to be talking about access to capital in a really real way. And it can't just be, there's a lot of, a lot of databases, a lot of information out there. But I think if we need to be really thoughtful about which assets and why, and thinking about how that relates to the long-term impacts. So I think you have a really good illustrative example there, and I'm seeing so much excitement in the chat. So, and Morgan included the link to Mark's talk from the last ELC conference. And lastly, in the last few minutes, Jose, is there anything else you'd like to add? Now that I know you kind of got us started on the question, but I wanted to make sure you had a moment, just if there was anything else that percolated as we kept talking.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for having me, and just tremendous points about information being power. And I dropped in the chat an example where Mark really went above and beyond to curate resources that we're making available to our entrepreneurs. And we're talking about resource guides for entrepreneurs with disabilities, BIPOC, GLBTQIA, women entrepreneurs, and just really made these resources are tremendous. And having these and making them front and center in our ecosystem is one tangible way to do that. And so, yeah, no, definitely. The other last note I'll end on is just the talk about ecosystems and proximity and information on the bus line. That's incredible. That's a mic drop moment right there. Information and providing access to that knowledge power on the bus lines that in places that are accessible. And when we talk about, I'll leave with this, when we talk about ecosystems within ecosystems, it truly is like what Victor Chang talked about in rainforests. It's a rainforest of opportunities and pathways and intersections. And so proximity to each other, proximity to information is absolutely paramount. So thank you for the opportunity. Great to be here. We can keep going. So.
No, I just cannot thank the three of you enough. You guys have been so wonderful in sharing your expertise with all of us today. I have like 16 notes that I've written down of just like words that you've said that I am gonna like hang on my wall. So thank you all so much. I'm going to let us pause and we will break for the next 7 minutes. So please get coffee, run to the bathroom, and we will kick off our next session at 3:10. And thank you again to our panelists, Jose, Judy, and Wilson.